1,252 people. That's how many shoplifters I caught as a loss prevention manager back in the day. Countless guns pulled on me, countless knives pulled on me, fight after fight after fight, crazy experience after crazy experience, shoplifters just being freaking nuts. Today's story is not about that. Today's story is about a pretty nice shoplifter and me being a little crazy. This is a story about the dumbest thing I've ever done. Here we go. Okay, so here we are, back in Bellevue, Nebraska, where quite a few of my crazy tales have taken place. Always good times here. Before I tell you my crazy story, I want to preface it by saying two things. Number one, you have to understand back in the day, loss prevention or asset protection was like the wild, wild west. We had cowboy and cowgirl mentality. It got a little crazy. Nowadays, loss prevention people kind of have their hands tied. There are a lot more rules. You just can't do as much, and that's fine for safety and everything, and I understand why it's the case. But it kind of sucks because their hands are tied and they can't do as much. Back in the day, if you stole from us, we were going to get you. You were coming back with us. Whether it was a knockdown, drag-out fight, you were coming back with us. So that's number one. Just remember how bad it used to be. Now, I go a little overboard on this one, but it was the wild, wild west back then. And this story takes place 20 years ago, which is crazy. Time flies. Number two, I just kind of want to give you a little background of what happens with these shoplifters. So we'd see somebody steal. We'd watch them the entire time they were in the store, make sure they didn't ditch the product. However they stole it, we'd just make sure they didn't ditch it. And then we'd give them every chance to pay for it, so we didn't stop them until they got to the front doors. So we waited till they passed the registers, got to the front doors, we jumped out, grabbed them, identified ourselves, brought them into our office, got our stuff back. Sometimes that was easier said than done, but we'd eventually get our stuff back. We'd call the police, and then while we waited for the police, we'd chit-chat or have very uncomfortable silence or whatever it was. But we were going to, number one, have them arrested, and number two, every person, at least at the retailer I worked at, we would sue the shoplifter. We called it civil restitution. So we would sue them for the price of the item they destroyed or stole, and we'd sue them for our time. So the time we were in there dealing with them, we couldn't catch other shoplifters, so we were able to, by law, sue them for that. Now in Nebraska, there's different laws in every state for the civil restitution. In Nebraska, the laws sucked. So we got very little out of these shoplifters. It was usually a flat fee. I think the most we ever got was like $120. And by average, it was about $60 that we would sue these shoplifters for. So that comes into play with this story and how stupid I was being. So again, we'd have them arrested and we'd sue them. So one way or the other, we were getting our money back and we were getting some legal justice. So that's how it worked. So that brings us to today's story. Okay, so I'm in that store right back there, sitting there watching cameras. There is no one in the store. It is dead. All my paperwork is done, nothing else to do, so I keep watching cameras. You know, all it takes is that one person in the store, and they could be the biggest thief you've ever busted. So even when it was really slow, you just never knew when your life was about to change, and the craziest thing that ever happened to you was about to happen. And that's kind of what happens in this case. Anyway, I'm watching cameras, one person in the store. He's all I got to watch. Not your typical shoplifter, you know, didn't look shady, well-dressed, minding his own business, but no one else is in the store, so sometimes you just watch to watch. At that time, laser pointers were all the rage. I don't know if you remember the little laser pointer flashlights. They were really annoying at concerts, that kind of thing, usually banned at concerts. But they were all the rage for the shoplifters. And so they're a small dollar amount, and I've said this before, but this was like hunting and fishing, but for people. So we just wanted a stat. We were very competitive with our colleagues. We wanted to catch people. We wanted to beat our colleague across town. We wanted to have more shoplifters than them. So ideally, you'd have a big bust, you know, thousands of dollars in electronics, whatever it was. But sometimes you take the small bust, like a laser pointer. So this guy selects one and then pockets it. I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. Here we go. Got a big laser pointer bust. Woohoo! So anyway, I watch him. He passes the last point of sale. I go out to grab him and bring him in the office. Okay, so I get him in the office, and our first thing out of our mouth is usually, at least at this retailer, is we need you to place everything you didn't pay for on the desk. So I say that, and he doesn't say a word, and he takes the laser pointer out and puts it on the desk. So at that point, that's when we know we've got him, and we start to call the police, and then we start to ask information, name, address, all of that kind of thing. So I start to ask him those questions, because not only do we want it for the police, but we also want it to send to our corporate office so they can go after him for that civil restitution. I start to ask him those questions, and he doesn't speak English. Now, there was always the opportunity for a language barrier. One of my biggest regrets in life is that I haven't traveled the world and learned every language I possibly could and be more worldly. But sometimes we would bust somebody that didn't speak English. It was just a plain fact. Now, in this case, this gentleman spoke Chinese. So he started talking to me in Chinese, and I unfortunately just couldn't understand him. So I'm trying to get his information, and it's just not working out. Now, in this particular bust, I did have somebody with me, the gentleman that worked for me, my loss prevention associate. And so I had the brilliant idea that the guy across the street at the restaurant here, I knew he spoke Chinese because I ate there a lot and talked to him, and I actually talked to him about, possibly learning Chinese, just to have another language under my belt. So I got the wise idea to tell my loss prevention associate to go grab him so he could translate. I just thought, hey, this kind of works out. I happen to know a guy that speaks Chinese. So he goes and grabs him. I'm sitting there kind of awkwardly with the shoplifter waiting for the cop to show up. And my loss prevention associate comes back with the guy from the restaurant across the street. And that gentleman starts talking to the shoplifter. I'm telling him to just try to get his name and address so we can, get things proceeding. So he's talking to him, but he's not really getting the information I want. I can kind of tell that they're talking about other things. I'm just not sure what's going on. So I'm getting a little frustrated. And then the cop shows up. God bless the Bellevue Police Department. They always had our back. They were wonderful. But in this case, the cop shows up, can see the language barrier situations going on, can see I'm not having any luck getting any information. He briefly tries with the guy across the street who's translating. Once again, talking to the shoplifter, but not quite getting the information we want. So the police officer just decides, because of the dollar amount of the laser pointer, this guy seems, like a nice, normal dude. Wasn't a hardcore criminal or anything. So the cop just decides that he doesn't want to pursue the criminal part of things, which was fine. That was his discretion. But unfortunately for me, once I have somebody in my office, I have to pursue that civil restitution. I can't just let him go without an address or phone number, because then it becomes what's called a bad stop, and I just couldn't have that happen. So I needed to get his information. So the one thing we did get out of the translator gentleman is that our shoplifter happened to live in the apartment complex across the street from this store. So I'm like, great. So I asked the police officer, hey, would you mind just meeting me over there? I'll walk over there with the shoplifter. And this is where things get stupid, because there's no way I should have even suggested such a thing. But hey, I was me, and that's what I suggested. So I asked the cop, will you meet me over there? Can we just get his address? I thought maybe I'd get it off the building or whatever it was. I just needed something. So the cop said, sure, I'll meet you over there. So the cop gets in his car and leaves. And me, the shoplifter, and my loss prevention associate start walking across the street. So we're walking across the parking lot, just hanging out, just having a nice little stroll. Shoplifter at this point, without the translator there, just isn't saying anything. He's just a sweet little dude, made a mistake. I got us into this crazy situation, but hey, he stole, but still, nice enough person, not a hardcore criminal. So we're walking across the parking lot. I think we're going to go meet the cop. And we get to the gas station across the street. Now, as soon as we get to the gas station across the street, all of a sudden this Cadillac rolls up. And at that time, CDs were all the rage. Again, this was 20 years ago. Guy rolls up in a caddy. He's got a duffel bag full of CDs on the passenger seat. And he asks us if we want to buy some. So there I am standing with the shoplifter, my loss prevention associate, being asked if we want to buy these CDs, which are clearly stolen. So my loss prevention associate, we had these badges that looked just like police badges, but they said loss prevention on them, but you can't really tell that unless you look up close. So my loss prevention associate pulls his badge out. The guy thinks we're cops. So he pulls out, goes over that median right there, almost kills like 12 people that are coming on because he tries to do a U-turn. And so he goes over the median, does this very harsh turn, and starts speeding away thinking we're police officers, which is ridiculous. I mean, whatever, but it's crazy. So I'm thinking, okay, that's crazy. Poor, nice little innocent shoplifter is just sitting there like, whoa, what's going on here? So that was part one in my crazy little stroll across the street. So we keep walking, and I'm like, okay. So I see that, unfortunately, we got to go up this stupid hill to get up the apartment complex, this hill behind the gas station. So I'm like, whatever. So we all trudge up this hill, and we get up there, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, turns out the maintenance guy at this apartment complex is roaming around, and he's a guy that used to work for us that I busted for employee theft, and he was stealing Hot Wheels. And once again, busting somebody for something stupid, but we had zero tolerance for employees that stole. So I busted him and had him fired. But he did not like me because of that. He just did not like me. So he walks up to me and he just starts screaming. And he's head bobbing, and I just don't take things like that very well. So then I start bobbing back and forth. I'm dropping the F-bomb. It's getting a little harsh. Poor little shoplifter dude's just sitting there watching all this. So it's getting a little heated. So I tell my loss prevention associate to go talk to the apartment management people and tell them that we're just not some random people out having a fight, that we're actually waiting for this police officer. And so he goes and tells the apartment people, and then he comes back and he kind of takes the maintenance dude aside because they knew each other. And my loss prevention associate didn't like him very much, but he was a little more even keeled at this time to talk to him and get things level headed. So he pulls him off, and I go off with the shoplifter by myself, still waiting for the cop. Cop's nowhere to be seen. So as you can see, I walk up to the building, but as you can see, there are no building numbers. And that's what I thought. I thought I'd just get a building number. I kind of knew the street we were on, and we'd be good. I'd have an address. And then from the translator, the one thing we did get out of him was his first and last name. So that's all I needed. But there's no building number. So I'm like, ugh. And this is so stupid of me. But no cop. I'm with the shoplifter by myself. No building number. So what does George decide to do? He decides he's going to go inside and get a piece of the shoplifter's mail. And so I can get his address. Now, mind you, this is all for probably $60 that we were going to sue this guy for this laser pointer. But I was young and stupid. This is the first year of my loss prevention career, and I wanted my $60. I was hardcore. I had that cowboy mentality. Wild, Wild West. I was getting our money, even though he's like the nicest shoplifter ever. So I decided I'm going to go get a piece of mail. So the shoplifter just kind of somehow senses, maybe he did secretly speak English, I don't know, but he kind of senses that what I was going to do. So he takes me inside. So I walk in this guy's apartment, and this is where it gets a little weird. I walk in, and the entire apartment is full of people, wall to wall full of people, and they're just sitting on mattresses. And I kid you not, and this goes back to the name of the playlist on the channel here. You can't make this stuff up. I kid you not, there are mattresses on every square inch of this apartment. Even in the hallway down to the bedroom, mattresses. Mattresses in the bedrooms, mattresses on the living room, one mattress in the kitchen. People on all of them. There's one folding chair in the middle of the room, and I'll never forget. They're all just sitting there watching I Love Lucy. Now, at that moment, I realized how dumb I was, because let's say this was a meth lab or a drug den or something like that, or all hardcore criminals, and the shoplifter just had me fooled. I could have been dead. Who knows what they would have done to me, or all started to try to fight me. But I was so stupid to be in this apartment. But I wanted that piece of mail, and I wanted my $60, damn it. So, but they are once again, just like the shoplifter, nicest people ever. They look at him like, oh, hey, he brought somebody home to hang out with us. And I'm just, okay, this is great. So luckily they were nice, but I just couldn't believe how many people were in this apartment. You talk about fire codes, you talk about everything, and the mattresses. I mean, there was no furniture except for a folding chair in this apartment, just all mattresses, people just hanging out, either sleeping or watching I Love Lucy. It was just very surreal. So I grab a piece of mail. I write down his address. Yay, I win. I got his address. So I walk outside, And guess who's outside? The cop. Like, where have you been? I love you to death, but where have you been? You know what I just did? I was so stupid. So he walks up to me and we start chatting, and all of a sudden this dude in this Lexus rolls up. And he gets out and he's got this wad of cash in his hand. He was in the driver's seat, and out of the passenger seat is the restaurant owner that I originally got to translate. They roll up together. The guy that was driving the Lexus has this wad of money, and he's just asking me if we can just take care of this. Can we just take care of this? Now, that's not the way it works. I got to send it off to our corporate office. They go through the process to get our money back. So I can't just take this guy's money. So I explained that to him. No, 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 no. So the cop sees this happen and starts to ask him questions. Well, it turns out that the first gentleman that I got to translate and this guy in the Lexus own several restaurants here in town, Bellevue, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, several restaurants, and all of their employees live in that apartment. And then it turns out through an investigation, the apartment across the hall. So that's why he wasn't helping me, because it was his employee and he just wasn't sharing that information with me. And, you know, they were breaking all sorts of laws, having all these people living in these two apartments. And that's why he didn't help me out. So it just came full circle that I just picked the wrong dude to translate. And again, I did all of this for $60. So even though there wasn't violence, there wasn't a gun, there wasn't a knife, this was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I pursued that hardcore for $60, and I could have been killed in that apartment. I mean, never seen again. George goes in, he never comes out. Thank God they were the nicest people ever. And I still give a nod to that shoplifter for being so sweet. And I'm sorry, dude, wherever you are now today, I apologize. I was just doing my job. You shouldn't have stole that laser pointer. Anyway, that's today's crazy shoplifter story. In this case, crazy loss prevention person story. Hope you enjoyed it. All my loss prevention peeps out there, if you got a story like this one, please share with me. Figure out a way to get a hold of me. Send me a video of you telling the story, or you and your crew. We don't have to mention your store's name. We can just use your first name and what geographical location you're from. I promise we'll make it nice and secure so nobody gets in trouble. But get a hold of me and send me a story. I'd love to share it. Until next time, peace and love.